Most people believe power begins when you receive a promotion. It does not. A new title may give you responsibility, but responsibility and power are not the same thing. Real power begins when people can no longer ignore your information, your relationships, your decisions, or your ability to shape what happens next. Every organization has a visible structure: employees, managers, directors, executives. But behind that structure is another hierarchy. A hierarchy based on access, influence, capital, and control. These are the 8 levels of power, and most people spend their entire careers trapped inside the first 3. Level 1. The executor at the first level. You are paid to complete tasks. Someone else decides what needs to be done, when it needs to be completed, and what the final result should look like. Your morning begins with messages, assignments, corrections, spreadsheets, reports, presentations, and deadlines. You are not expected to question the direction. You are expected to execute it. At this stage, reliability becomes your most valuable quality. You respond quickly. You meet deadlines. You solve the problems placed directly in front of you. People begin describing you as hardworking, responsible, and dependable. But there is a limitation. You are working inside decisions that have already been made. A campaign suddenly changes. A project is cancelled without explanation. A person with average performance gets promoted while someone more productive is ignored. You see the result, but you do not see the conversation that created it. This is where many people become frustrated. They believe working harder should automatically produce more influence. But hard work makes you useful. It does not automatically make you powerful. Power begins when you understand where decisions come from. That realization takes you to the second level. Level 2, the listener at the second level. Your position may not look dramatically different. You still have deadlines. You still complete assignments. You still report to people above you. But now, you are closer to the conversations that matter. You are invited into meetings you once only prepared documents for. You hear concerns before they become official problems. You learn which projects senior leaders actually care about and which projects exist only because someone needs to appear busy. At first, you remain quiet, but you listen carefully. You begin to notice that official communication is often late. By the time an announcement reaches the entire company, influential people have already been preparing for it. They knew the department would be restructured. They knew a major client was leaving. They knew a new leader was being considered. They did not predict the future. They simply had access to information before everyone else. At this level, you learn that information has a timing advantage. Knowing something after everyone else gives you knowledge. Knowing it before everyone else gives you leverage. You begin preparing before instructions arrive. You adjust your work before priorities officially change. People notice that you always seem ready. Soon, colleagues start asking you what is happening, not because you have authority, but because you have context. And context is the beginning of influence. Level 3, the fixer at the third level. People stop valuing you only for the tasks you complete. They begin valuing you for the problems you prevent. A project is falling behind, and you reorganize it. 2 departments are blaming each other, and you bring them into alignment. An approval is delayed, and you know exactly who needs to be contacted. You are no longer simply following the process. You understand how the process actually behaves. Every organization has written rules, but it also has hidden shortcuts, informal relationships, and people whose approval matters more than their official title suggests. The fixer learns these patterns. You know which manager responds to data, which executive responds to urgency, which department needs to be involved early, and which person can quietly destroy an entire project if they feel ignored. Your influence grows because senior leaders trust you to protect them from operational chaos. They give you complicated assignments because you return with solutions instead of excuses. But this level can become a trap. The better you become at fixing problems, the more problems people give you. You may become essential to the operation while remaining excluded from the decisions that create the operation. To move higher, you must stop being known only for solving problems. You must become known for connecting people who can create opportunities. Level 4. The Connector at Level 4. Your network becomes more valuable than your workload. You know people across departments, companies, industries, and professional circles. When someone needs an answer, you know who has it. When someone needs a partnership, you know who should meet. When an opportunity appears, you can immediately identify the people capable of acting on it. This changes the way you work. You no longer begin every problem by opening a procedure manual. You begin with a name. A short conversation replaces weeks of emails. A trusted introduction creates more progress than a formal proposal. A phone call removes an obstacle that several meetings could not resolve. Your value is no longer limited to what you can personally produce. It now includes what you can make possible through other people. This is leverage. A person working alone can only create as much as their own time and ability allow. A connector can activate the knowledge, capital, authority, and resources of an entire network. But simply knowing people is not enough. A powerful network is not measured by the number of contacts saved in your phone. It is measured by how quickly those people respond when you call. At this level, relationships become an asset, and once enough people depend on you for introductions, your power begins to change again. You are no longer only creating connections, you are deciding which connections deserve to happen. Level 5. The gatekeeper rarely looks like the most powerful person in the room. They may not deliver the keynote speech. Their name may not appear at the top of the organization, but important requests pass through them. They decide which proposal receives attention, which meeting reaches the calendar, which message gets forwarded, which person is introduced to the decision maker, and which opportunity quietly disappears. Most people focus on the leader behind the door. They ignore the person controlling the door. That is a mistake. Attention is limited. Senior leaders cannot review every idea, meet every person, or evaluate every proposal. Someone must filter the flow. At this level, your judgment becomes a form of power. People begin approaching you differently. They become more prepared, more respectful, more strategic. They understand that wasting your time may cost them access to someone or something more important. You are now influencing decisions before the official decision even begins. By choosing what gets presented, you influence what can be selected. By choosing what gets ignored, you remove possibilities without publicly rejecting them. But access is still only the entrance to power. The next level controls the resources waiting on the other side. Level 6. The allocator at Level 6. Your decisions determine where resources move. The resource may be money, it may be staff, technology, media attention, institutional support, or political influence. The specific resource changes. The principle does not. You decide which ideas receive the fuel required to survive. Every proposal arrives with confident forecasts. Every founder believes their company will succeed. Every department claims its project is essential. Every leader presents a convincing explanation for why they need more resources. But resources are limited. Supporting one direction often means rejecting another. This is why allocation creates real influence. A company may have brilliant ideas, but without capital, those ideas remain presentations. A team may have talented people, but without budget or authority, their impact remains limited. At this level, you are no longer observing which opportunities succeed. You are helping determine which opportunities are allowed to compete. You evaluate risk. You study timing. You examine incentives. Most importantly, you evaluate the people responsible for execution. Because experienced allocators understand something beginners often miss. A strong idea in the hands of the wrong team can collapse. An average idea in the hands of an exceptional team can evolve. The allocator does not only fund plans. The allocator decides who deserves the chance to build the future. And once you begin choosing the people who receive resources, you eventually begin influencing who receives leadership itself. Level 7. The Kingmaker at Level 7. Your greatest influence is not over projects, it is over careers. You are present when leaders are selected, supported, promoted, or removed. The public sees the final announcement. You saw the private conversations that happened months earlier. You know who recommended the candidate, who defended them, who questioned them, and whose support ultimately made the decision possible. At this level, power rarely needs to announce itself. Your name may not appear beside the decision. Your influence may remain invisible, but your opinion carries weight inside rooms where important appointments are discussed. A recommendation from you opens doors. Your silence creates doubt. Your opposition may stop someone's rise before they even realize they were being considered. You are no longer only shaping individual outcomes. You are shaping the network of leaders who will make thousands of future decisions. This is how influence compounds. The people you help rise may control companies, institutions, markets, or public organizations. Their decisions then strengthen the structures and relationships that supported them. Power begins reproducing itself. But even the Kingmaker operates inside an existing environment. There is still one level above them, the level occupied by people who do not simply select the players. They design the game the players must enter. Level 8, the architect at the final level, power becomes structural. You are no longer focused only on completing tasks, controlling information, connecting people, funding projects, or selecting leaders. You are shaping the rules that influence all of them. The architect designs systems, policies, financial frameworks, institutional incentives, technological platforms, legal structures, standards that determine what organizations can do, what markets reward, and which behaviors become profitable. At this level, a small change can influence millions of people without most of them ever knowing where the change began. A regulation redirects an entire industry. A platform changes how businesses reach customers. A financial model changes what investors consider valuable. An incentive encourages thousands of organizations to move in the same direction. The architect does not need to control every individual decision. They design the environment that makes certain decisions more likely. This is the highest form of leverage. Direct control requires constant attention. Structural influence continues working even when the architect is not present. People believe they are making independent choices, but their choices are being shaped by the options, rewards, limitations, and incentives built into the system. This is why the highest level of power is often the least visible. People notice the employee completing the task. They notice the manager giving instructions. They notice the executive announcing a decision. They rarely notice the person who designed the structure that made all three behave the way they did. And that leads to the most important lesson. Power is not one thing. At the bottom, power looks like productivity. Then it becomes information. After that, it becomes execution, relationships, access, resources, leadership, and finally design. Most people try to climb by working harder at the level they already occupy. The executor completes more tasks. The fixer solves more problems. The connector collects more contacts. But progress requires a different question. Not, how can I work harder? Ask, what form of leverage exists at the next level? Because every level rewards a different skill. Reliability gets you noticed. Information helps you prepare. Execution builds trust. Relationships create leverage. Access creates scarcity. Capital shapes opportunity. Leadership shapes institutions. And systems shape everyone. The game is not always fair. It is not always visible. But it becomes easier to understand once you recognize the levels. So ask yourself honestly, which level are you operating at right now? And more importantly, what must you learn before you can reach the next one? Because power does not begin when someone gives you a title. It begins when your presence changes what becomes possible.